Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives. So, now that we're done with Marvel's Voices Spider-Verse #1, I think it's time we get to the follow-up mini-series from End of the Spider-Verse. And as I mentioned in the last video, that follow-up mini-series is this, Edge of Spider-Verse. Yeah, like I said, while the previous Spider-Verse themed events have usually had Edge of lead-ins, apparently End of the Spider-Verse warranted having an Edge of follow-up as well. Yeah, it's at this point that Marvel is clearly trying to just kind of cash in on the Spider-Verse name as much as possible. It's part of the reason why why they're already in the process of getting another one out there. Hell, issue 3 is going to be coming out soon, which actually has a space spider that looks pretty damn cool. But that's another topic altogether, which we'll talk about in a potential future vlog. My point is, there is another Edge of Spider-Verse miniseries, and of course, before we move on to the Death of the Venomverse storyline, we gotta look at this as well. So, is this any good? Does it contain all that good Edge of Spider-Verse sweetness that I always kind of appreciate? Well, let's take a look at it and find out. And of course, to kick things off, we'll start off with Edge of Spider-Verse Volume 3, Number 1. And, well, unlike most of the other Edge of Spider-Verse miniseries, or more specifically the last Edge of Spider-Verse miniseries, this one actually has 2 stories per issue, with the exception of the 3rd issue, or the 4th issue, which has 3 stories. But ultimately, it kind of gives us a little bit more to work with, as since it's supposed to be 2 stories filling up a book, it means it allows for more time for each Spidey. So, does this extra amount of time allow us to develop them more? Well, how are they? Well, let's take a look at the first story. And the first story is actually focusing on the Spider-Rex again. And it's called Enter Cravertooth the Hunter. And if you can't tell by that title, we're meeting this Spider-Rex's version of Kraven the Hunter, who in this reality is actually a saber-toothed cat who, like the main universe Kraven, is a hunter, and he pretty much just wants to hunt the most dangerous game, and he's now set his sights on the Spider-Rex because he thinks he's worthy of his attention. Funny little thing too, Cravertooth, instead of having a lion, because he's a saber-toothed cat, rather than having a lion pelt, he has an ape pelt around his neck and a little necklace of teeth. But either way, yeah, to find the Spider-Rex, he is threatening his aunt and uncle, and wants to ask them, where is Spider-Rex? Tell me. And of course, they don't know. They don't know where their nephew is at all times of the day. But as a result, since they're not telling him what he wants, he holds them both over a cliff and threatens to drop them. Ultimately, that's when Spider-Rex does arrive on the scene. He tells Cravertooth to let them go, more specifically his uncle. And Cravertooth says, of course, it's like, well, and Cravertooth is more than willing to do what he wants, and so he drops Peter's uncle, only for his uncle to flap up, because you gotta remember, they're pterodactyls. They can fly. So yeah, it's not really as dramatic as they want. Plus, while that was being distracted, this world's version of Spider-Woman comes in and gets Peter's Aunt May away. And want to know what this world's version of Spider-Woman is? It's a giant red spider named Jess. Okay. But either way, yeah, Peter's aunt and uncle are away, so that means that Spider-Rex and Cravertooth can now duke it out. And it's actually a pretty cool fight. It's just, of course, it does all the flippy tippy shit that you kind of expect from a Spider-Man battle. And it's, of course, it's a giant T-Rex, which is a saber-toothed cat. It's actually pretty damn cool. Although, of course, it's still drenched in that same campy cheesiness that the original Spider-Rex story was filled with, because, well, they're quipping they're quipping to hell and back. They're just making fun of everything, doing wordplay, puns, and basically, as they're duking it out, they end up falling off of the cliff, and basically, Cravertooth is not giving up, and he and Spidey just keep trading quips after one another, making cat-themed puns, like, catch me, or Cravertooth says, do you have a cure for cat scratch fever, as he scratches him. It's just stupid and dumb, and it's kind of stupid and dumb. And it finally gets to the point where Spider-Rex kicks Cravertooth into a tree, and when he tells him to back off, Cravertooth says, you don't want me to expect me to just leave so soon? And Spider-Rex says, okay, please stop. You're just going to get yourself hurt. And and then Cravertooth says, I guess I just need to branch out. And Spider says, please stop. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't know. I don't know. That's funny. But either way, Cravertooth does break out and even manages to latch onto Spider-Rex's tongue, causing him to further tumble down the cliff. But at the bottom of the cliff, we see a group of small dinosaurs that are singing Spider-Rex's theme song, which, again, apparently Spider-Rex could actually hear very early in the story, and it's here we meet this world's version of both J. Jonah Jameson and Mary Jane Watson, who are, let me see if I can actually find them, because they do list them. In Mary Jane's case, she is called Mary Jane Watsor, and she is a raptor, and Jonah Jameson is called Jingshanosaurus, and he's just essentially, and basically, he's just a dinosaur that hates Spider-Rex, and he just constantly complains about him. However, as Jameson Dinosaur ends up complaining about Spider-Man and Mary Jane Watson tells him to calm down, she ends up getting a little bit of backup from a Brachiosaurus, specifically a Brachiosaurus named Eddie Brachiosaurus. With a name like that, I'm sure he's destined for good things. But ultimately, as the other dinos are still singing Spider-X's theme song, they quickly notice, hey, the air is getting darker, before they see Spider-X and Cravertooth come flying at them, and they end up tumbling right into the group of dinos. Unfortunately, they also end up hitting Eddie, and well, this whole little gathering, it was by a tar pit, and sadly, Eddie gets knocked in. And while Spider-X begins reorienting himself, and Mary Jane Watson acknowledges him, which he just thinks is great because she never noticed him before when he was puny little Petarker, she ends up freaking out because hey, Eddie's going in the tar pit. As such, Spider-X ends up shooting a couple web lines at his exposed tail to try and pull him out. Only when Eddie comes out, he looks less like a Brachiosaurus and more like a venomized T-Rex. Yep, this is the start of Venomsaurus Rex, which is again a little weird, but ultimately Venomsaurus Rex ends up taking over the show, and Cravertooth immediately just looks at this and thinks, you know what, I don't need to be involved in this, and he just runs away, with the story even mocking him, calling Exit Craventooth the Coward. But either way, yeah, it's now Spider-X versus Venomsaurus Rex, and yeah, Venomsaurus Rex is still very much superior to him. As he tries duking it out, but in the midst of all this, in the midst of everything, Venomsaurus Rex is trying to eat dinosaurs, with Spider-X rescuing him. At one point, he goes for Jameson Dinosaur. I can't pronounce his name. I just can't. And he tries eating him, but Spider-X saves his life, and while Jameson Dinosaur is yelling at Spider-X for his disregard, especially since it was Spider-X knocking into Eddie that caused him to get covered in the tar pits and turn him into the Venomsaurus Rex, immediately Spider-X notices something. Venomsaurus Rex is gone, and so is Mary Jane Watson. Yeah, it turns out that Venomsaurus Rex wants to make her wants to venomize her, and so he's bringing her to a volcano where they can be alone, and so he can infect her with symbiote tendrils. As such, she calls for Spider-X's help, and he's like, she knows my name, and he chases after her, leaving Jonah hanging from a tree. But in the meantime, Venomsaurus Rex has Mary Jane over a lava pit, and as this symbiote tendrils begin covering her, she keeps trying to plead with Eddie, but with Eddie tries to tell him that he doesn't want to do this, that he shouldn't let the monster come through, that she knows he's a good person, that they're friends, blah blah blah. Point is, she's just trying to reach the good man beneath the monster. But unfortunately, though, anything that was left of Eddie is consumed by the Venomsaurus Rex, and Mary Jane's like, you know what, I tried. And at which point she ends up taking a bite out of the symbiote tendrils that gets herself free. Unfortunately, this also caused her to nearly fall into the lava, and ultimately it looks like Venomsaurus is not going to do anything. But thankfully, that's when Spider-X shows up. Oh, well, he actually did show up a little earlier, but then got thrown away. But he's now back, and he saves Mary Jane just before she can take a dip in the lava. And so after doing a slingshot maneuver where he and Mary Jane get thrown up to the cliff again, Spider-Rex ends up swinging right into Eddie and ends up tossing him right into the lava pits. As such, Mary Jane is happy to be safe, and she thanks Spider-Rex for saving her. Spider-Rex says, "No, you did most of the saving yourself, Mary Jane. I just kind of pitched in a little." At which point Mary Jane's like, "You know my name?" And there's a little spark between them as they both go in for a kiss, only for there to be a massive eruption from the volcano behind them, which Spider-X thinks is meant to be the shockwave of their kiss, but Mary Jane says, no, it was a good kiss, but I think this is something else. And when they look towards the eruption, well, it looks like that the eruption of the lava is causing a bit more carnage than they would like. And so the story ends as we hear the chorus of dinosaurs telling Spider-Rex that things are going to change and he's probably going to need all the help he can get. And once again, Jameson Dinosaur telling them all to pretty much just knock that all off. So there's that. As for the second story, this one it's a weird one, but it's a good kind of weird. I'll get to that in a later. But basically, this world takes place, this is the story of the Spider Killer, and it's called, well, Curse of the Spider Killer. And you want to know something kind of funny? You know how the Marvel Noir universe is designated Earth 90214? Well, this world is one world away from that, as this one is Earth 90215. And, well, if you can't tell by the name of the story, this world's Spider-Man is, bit darker than your standard webhead. And the story surrounding this particular Spidey involves a tale of extortion. Basically, this world's version of Harry Osborn and Jameson, who in this reality are completely different people, as kinda. Harry is still, I'm guessing, the head of Oscorp and worth a lot of money, and the Jameson is not Jonah Jameson. It's a woman, but she's basically just called Jameson, and while she's still in charge of the Daily Bugle, I don't really know what her connection to Spider-Man is, or even if she's actually meant to be J. Jonah Jameson. Point is, though, she and Harry are either married or engaged, and they're having some trouble with a criminal element, as someone has been sending them threatening letters and pretty much telling them they demand a crap ton of money, and they want... Hold on a second. Sorry. But yeah, basically what's going on is that they're being threatened by this world's version of the Chameleon, who is a street criminal, and like I said, he's basically blackmailing them to get a crap ton of money, and if they don't comply, then bad things will happen. As such, Harry, kind of at the end of his rope, begins kind of looking through New York City or underbelly to see if he can find someone that can take care of the Chameleon, and eventually his searches do bear fruit, as he finds himself directed to an old office building in Old York. And as he goes to find it, and the note that tells him where to go, it mentions that he has to find the door with a red spider on the front. And, well, Harry finds that, and when he goes inside, he finds himself in a derelict old office that's almost just covered in spider webs, with the only real distinct impression that it has, anything really distinct about it, is that there's a desk and a chair in the middle of all it, and, well, there's someone sitting behind the desk. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Spider Killer, and he's a creepy motherfucker, let me tell you. Let me see if I can find a good shot of him. This is the Spider Killer. Sorry, it's hard to do when there's a light shining on it, but yeah, the first appearance of the Spider Killer is more than threatening. You see like a series of spider legs sticking out from the darkness, a red spider symbol right there, as well as his eyes, as he pretty much just welcomes Harry in and takes a seat. Now, from here, we don't end up seeing what happened, but from here, we don't... Well, this part's told to us in exposition, though it's also shown physically. Harry begins kind of telling the Spider Killer about his woes, how the Chameleon and his flunkies are threatening him and his wife, or fiancé, again, I don't know, and basically, he wants to try... And basically, they need help. However, in the midst of all... And basically, from what I can gather, the Spider Killer does agree to it, though in the middle of the meeting, a spider does end up going on Harry's shoulder, and as Harry's about to swat it away, the Spider Killer stops him and tells him, it's bad luck to kill a spider. But either way, it's clear that the Spider Killer takes on the case, though as part of the payment for the deal, Harry's kind of needs to be scarce. What he's doing, I don't know. It's never really explained. But either way, we see that the Chameleon's flunkies over the next few days are feeling a little weird. And what I like is that the Chameleon's flunkies are, well, of course, alternate versions of Spider-Man villains, as one is clearly meant to be the Scorpion, and one is Dr. Curtis Connors, as, well, you see he's missing an arm, and he's injecting himself with something that gives him lizard-like scales in some parts of his body. But in the meantime, but the thing is, we see that both Scorpion and Dr. Connors are being trailed by something. Obviously, the Spider Killer, as it seems to be stalking them in the night, watching them go home, and while they're sleeping, it looks like you can see spider legs closing in on them, and they both wake up in cold sweats. Like they just feel like something is stalking them, haunting their dreams, just getting into their minds. But ultimately, throughout all this, Mrs. Jameson has actually gotten a letter from Harry explaining to her what she needs to do. And the letter pretty much just tells her that she needs to go to the appointed place and time with the money, and the Spider Killer will do the rest. As such, Mrs. Jameson does kind of follow the instructions, as she gets a briefcase full of money and goes to where the designated meeting point is in front of the Daily Bugle. And sure enough, the Chameleon is there, ready to greet her and take the money. Of course, Mrs. Jameson doesn't recognize him at first, but when she immediately sees him stalking out of the night, which kind of even more creepy. He not only has the chameleon face, but his eyes are just looking at the edges right here. It looks like his two lazy eyes. It looks kind of creepy, but either way, Chameleon comes here and he thinks that it's just gonna be a clean deal. Take the money and they'll leave, until they have an unexpected visitor, and we finally see the Spider Killer in full, no longer in the shadows. And again, let me see if I can actually get a good shot of this guy, because it's, again, he's a creepy motherfucker. Yeah, this is the Spider Killer. Just, it's a very good shot, in my opinion. Just like this monstrous thing that looks almost like a man, but with clear spider mutations out of it. Like, you see his cloak as he's hanging off of him, a pair of pants just going off going on the deep end. The way he looms over them, with his spider legs sticking out. He definitely looks. He's a very literal Spider-Man. He's like mostly spider with maybe some humanoid features mixed in there. It's creepy and it's very intimidating. But I dig it. But either way, the Spider Killer is looming over the Chameleon and his men, and they do what any criminals would do in that situation: shoot the big monster, and they gun it down right there. As such, the Chameleon's goons immediately realize that this is the thing that's been stalking them, and they pretty much just tell Mrs. Jameson, the Chameleon just tells Mrs. Jameson, well, good on you, Mrs. Jameson, you tried playing a game and you lost, well, better luck next time, come on, guys, let's go. But as the Chameleon and his men start walking away, we see that something is closing in on them, and as the area gets darker, the three of them look up, and whatever's closing in on them causes them to scream before we hear a slam. And the thing that slammed on top of them, it was the Daily Bugle sign. Yeah, it was the Daily Bugle sign. And from the shadows comes Harry Osborn. With Mrs. Jameson, she looks at all this and thinks, what the hell just happened? And she sees Harry there, and she begins wondering, did Harry do that? Did Harry knock over that building? But ultimately, no. It was just bad luck. Because after all, it's bad luck to kill a spider. But yeah, the Chameleon and his cronies are dead. And as for the Spider Killer, while it does look as though he's dead as well, in his passing, he apparently reproduced, as there is a little egg on the scene that came from his body. And while Mrs. Jameson and Harry are able to essentially are kind of glad that the bad guys are off their trail, they take the egg and they realize that whatever this thing is, it might actually be good for them in the future. And so they go back to the Spider Killer's office and place it on the desk as it waits to hatch into most likely a second Spider Killer. So there you go. That's the first issue. And my thoughts on them? Well, first let's talk about the Spider-Rex story. And again, much like the original Spider-Rex story in the last Edge of Spider-Verse miniseries, this one is stupid, but it's fun. It's just the same kind of silly, stupid fun. And again, you can very clearly tell that the people working behind this story do not take it seriously at all. Because, like I said before, it's Spider-Man if he was a fucking T-Rex. It's hard to take that seriously. And the whole story just kind of, again, plays it up and just has fun with the whole premise. From Cravertooth holding Aunt May and Uncle Ben over a cliff and threatening to drop them, and then when he actually does, he forgets they're fucking pterodactyls. They can fly. From having this world's Jessica Drew be a giant red spider who helps them out. When even Peter's like, wait, how is Cousin Jess related to us? It's kind of fun, which I find hilarious. From Spider-Rex and Cravertooth pretty much just doing a pun-off as they're battling, and finally it gets so tiring that even Spider-Rex is like, okay, let's just stop now. This is getting annoying. And even how Cravertooth's role as the villain gets usurped by Venomsaurus Rex. It's clear that they just it's like at this point in time, they're just throwing random shit at the wall and just wondering what parts will stick. It's kind of amazing, and I love it. It's ridiculous and silly and stupid, and quite frankly, that's just what it needs to be. The Spider-Rex universe is not one of those worlds that has a very deep meaning behind it. It's literally just there for funsies. And from the very outset of the story, you get this sense that you're not supposed to take any of this seriously. Because, you want to know how it starts out? We hear those little dinosaurs singing Spider-Rex's theme song while he's swinging around the jungle, and he's like, who's singing all that? Seriously, what's going on? Like that's again, that's clearly some bit of self-awareness right there. From having the Jameson dinosaur, again, I know he has a different name, but I cannot pronounce it, to him just constantly complaining about Spider Rex and telling the dinosaurs to knock it off, to just the impromptu introduction of Eddie Brachiosaurus before he gets knocked into a tar pit, which I guess the tar pit was actually a symbiote because it bonded with him and turned him into Venomsaurus Rex. So in that regard, it's just it's very clearly meant to just be silly and dumb, especially when the Spider-Rex and Mary Jane Watsaur begin crushing on each other. Like, the instant Spider-Rex sees her, like, Mary Jane Watsaur, she's a kind dinosaur, and she barely eats any other dinosaurs, which barely does not mean she doesn't it doesn't mean she doesn't eat dinosaurs. Hell, at one point when Venomsaurus Rex was holding her over the lava and trying to venomize her, she's like, wait, I don't deserve this, I don't even eat other dinosaurs. Very often. It's clear that, again, it's I don't know how many times I can say it, but ultimately, the story itself is just silly, stupid fun. From having a saber-toothed cat, Kraven the Hunter, to having a T-Rex version of Venom, especially since, like with Pater, he started out as a different dinosaur before going T-Rex, before going spider-themed T-Rex. Again, it's just meant to be some silly, dumb fun that you're really not supposed to take too seriously. It's just there. They put their all into it. They clearly did not take any of what they were doing seriously, and as a result, it's just an enjoyable ride from beginning to end. So there you go. But as for the Spider Killer story, this is one that, when I first read the comic, really kind of made me scratch my head. And not for any bad reasons, mind you. It's a strange little ditty. I can see why this world is meant to be one world off from the Marvel Noir universe, because in terms of tone, this world really feels much darker and dreary in comparison, especially when we're shown that the bad guys of the story are essentially like street-level criminal versions of the Chameleon, Scorpion, and the Lizard. And in that regard, it's very moody, very noir, very disturbing, and the story very much sets up just how serious and bleak things are as we see this world's version of Harry as he seeks out the Spider Killer. And again, the first shot we get of the Spider Killer sitting alone in his office, hiding in the darkness, as we see spider legs sticking out from the blackness, it creates a sense of unease, because immediately you just get bad vibes from this guy. You just immediately get the sense that this is not someone you want to cross, because he's called the Spider Killer for a reason. And throughout the whole time, the whole story is narrated from Harry's point of view, as he left a letter for Mrs. Jameson. Which again, let me go back to the story. Maybe it says that they're married or not. I'm just trying to figure it out. My dearest. Again, that's not really saying anything about as to whether they're married or not. I think they might be. I don't know. Either, let's just say his wife. Basically, as Harry and his wife are being threatened by the Chameleon and his goons, it very much just creates a sense that, Harry is. Sorry, the whole story is written through Harry's point of view to a letter that he wrote to his wife. That's what I was originally getting at. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But even throughout all this, you just get a sense that Harry just feels like he's screwed, and that even going to this guy was a bad idea because he's the Spider Killer. He's not someone you really want to meet in a dark alley, whether you hire him or not. And it just creates a sense of unease, especially when he actually does get the Spider Killer's help. Well, you get a sense that this Spider-Man is very different from a lot of the other ones, as well. There's no secret identity. This isn't a guy who flips through New York shooting webs out of his wrists. This is a monster in a very literal sense, and because again, it creates just a sense of unease as we check in with this world's versions of the Scorpion and the Lizard, as they're just kind of going to their humble abodes and trying to lie down for the night. But you see the Spider Killer tracking them, following them, closing in on them, and you just and seeing them get paranoid and afraid as they can feel this thing stalking them both in real life and in their dreams. It creates just a sense of weirdness and just general paranoia, I guess. I'm blanking on the word, but it just creates a sense of just unease and tension across the whole across the story, as you can as you can just feel this thing closing in on them. And when it actually gets to parts of the story that don't involve the spider killer, it creates like I said, it's a very noir, very dark setup, especially when we see Mrs. Jameson as she has the suitcase full of money and goes to meet with the chameleon. Like, it very much feels like that this is a much more grounded story and very dark in that regard. But what kind of made me scratch my head was, believe it or not, the ending. Because when I first read the story, I thought that it would end with the spider killer just swooping in and killing Chameleon and his crew. But it ended in a very different way. More specifically, with the spider killer being, well, killed. Like, I thought to myself, really? Like, at first I thought that the bullets were gonna do nothing. They just get right back up and then slaughter them. But the way they go about it very much makes things feel off. Something is clearly not right. Especially when, yes, they managed to kill this guy, but then they die themselves. And ultimately, while there's no real solid proof that there was a connection, I like. It's implied that part of the reason why the Daily Bugle signed on crushing the chameleon and his cronies was because they killed the spider killer. And like I said earlier in the story, he told Harry not to kill a spider. It's bad luck. So something was clear. So clearly, it's implied that the spider killer may have caused all that, but it's never confirmed. It's just ultimately chalked up to a spot of bad luck. It's very intriguing, and I kind of like the bit of ambiguousness left in that, because it kind of makes you fear the spider killer even more, especially since even though he's dead, it's very much implied that he will be back, as laying that egg was essentially his lifeline. Yes, he may have died here, but a new one will take his place and continue doing the same thing. And if that one dies, then another one will take his place, and so on and so forth. Basically, it's a great way it's just essentially creating a sense of unease, as we're shown that this Spidey is not like any of the standard web slingers in the multiverse. This one is not a superhero, he is a killer. And while he may be targeting criminals, this is still someone that you might want to just stay clear of unless you have no other option. Because at the end of the day, whether he actually straight up attacks you or he works in the shadows, essentially, the instant he's in your crosshairs, there's no escape. And the whole story does a great job at creating that sense of, that mood, that darkness, that shroud of shadow that the spider killer is adept at crawling through. It's very odd, very strange, very uneasy, and by the end, even in the midst of all this darkness and creepiness, there is still a little sense of hope, as at the end of the day, Harry and his wife are off the hook. They got the chameleon off their backs, and it's implied that ultimately, when this egg hatches, there might be someone out there that they can turn to if things ever go bad again. So again, it's darkness with maybe a smidge of light, though that light's still a little tainted, as the one who's providing said light is a genuine monster. So again, it's a strange story, but an interesting one. If I can pretty much make any sense of all that. Basically, it's a unique take on Spider-Man, but in a very different and very dark and twisted setting that I think actually makes the world a lot more interesting to look at. So on the whole, I would say Curse of the Spider Killer is a pretty good story, and definitely does a great job at setting up this more unique and definitely twisted variant of the web slingers. So yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. Like I said, Spider-X, silly, goopy, stupid fun that I kind of enjoy, and the Spider Killer story, definitely a very chilling and very moody story, but one that I think very much works. So yeah, on the whole, first issue is a good start, and of course the remaining issues I think are good too. But again, we'll get to those when we get to those. Point is, I hope you still enjoyed the video. I thank you for watching. I apologize if my rambling kind of got a little off track at certain points, but either way, I hope you have a good Thursday, and as always, I'll see you on Saturday, which, guess what? It's my birthday, so I'm probably going to do the vlog very early on, so, get it out of the way. But either way, I hope you join me in celebrating as we look at issue 2 of this mini-series. So till then, I hope you have a good day, and take care.